Well, it looks like we possibly have a 60-day ceasefire in the Iranian-US war. The question is, what do the details look like? Now, I liken this to being an old brawl on the playground as a kid. You might have a bully on the playground, and finally you confront that bully and you pretty much knock him on his tail. That's what the US did to Iran. The problem with this bully, it's not a single bully, it's more like a gang. So knocking out one person, one element, the Navy, the Air Force, the damage that's been done, you might have slowed them down, but you're not going to stop them. Remember, this is based on ideology. It's not based on economics. They have an enormous valuable resource that the whole world has to have: crude oil, natural gas, LNG byproducts, right? Everything involving Iran has to do with their ideology and where they want to be, not this next month, not by the end of 2026, where they need to be, let's say in 10, 20, 30 years. They have a game plan. They've not changed it. They want to annihilate Israel. They have all kinds of different political views around the world about Western economies and civilizations. So it's great news that maybe we have some kind of a ceasefire. It's great news that it's partially being looked at as something that is going to be adhered to some degree. I personally believe that this is just round one of several rounds over the next 5 or 10 years when it comes to the U.S. and intervention with the country of Iran. Here's a real underlying factor that most people are underplaying. What happens if today and going forward till November, President Trump loses the midterms? And now you have a lack of control in the House and the Senate, or both. Or even worse, in the next 30 months, you have a complete change in the White House from a Republican administration to a Democratic-led administration. We're talking two fundamentally polar opposite views, opinions, regulatory policies, objections, and the way geopolitical events around the world are handled. So today we have a heavy hand. We have a leader who's using everything he has within his powers and executive orders, both militarily, politically, financially, to make those bad actors around the world behave themselves. Could that possibly be changed as little as 5 months away in November of 2026 if the midterms do not go in favor of the president controlling the House and the Senate? And the answer is 100% yes. Could it be that over the next 30 months that the Iranian regime is simply saying, we're going to play nice until President Trump is gone? And we don't really care who the next president is. We don't really care the political party in the White House. What we care is he might have his foot on our throat today, but that foot's not being pressed very hard. If President Trump really felt he could control the Strait of Hormuz, if he felt he could stop the terrorists in Iran from doing their objectives, which is complete global disruption, then I don't believe they'd be firing missiles at Kuwait yesterday. I don't believe we'd have military action trying to suppress Republican Guard speedboats trying to lay mines in the Strait of Hormuz. Look, this is about a global reset by terrorists. You know, in my world, you liken it to maybe having an infestation with bed bugs, right? You say to yourself, well, this particular room had bed bugs. How do you get rid of it? If you've never gotten rid of bed bugs, it might be the hardest thing you've ever done in your life. It literally takes starving them to the point of complete terminal decimation before you can ever go back into that room again. It is the hardest bug I've ever seen in my life to get rid of. I'm not necessarily saying that terrorists are like bugs. What I'm saying is their intestinal fortitude, their desire to accomplish their goals, their ideology is far greater than whether President Trump has an economic boom or bust, far greater than whether France or Japan is out of jet fuel, far greater than what their neighbors think of them. They just don't care. They're not looking for alliances, really, in my view, outside of Russia and China and a few other terroristic countries. So when this negotiation and ceasefire happens today, and it looks like they're going to sign it, what it really tells me is the President of the United States has got himself in a hornet's nest. He cannot accomplish his goal without putting boots on the ground. So the next best thing, at least in the political environment and in the mind and the media of the public and the world looking, how can I look like I've won, but I haven't finished the job? And I think that is delay. You don't let the Iranian regime push you back on making concessions and coming to a signed document agreement, which, by the way, they never honor, they never keep, they never adhere to. They just put words on paper, they give promises, They have all kinds of individuals stand up and talk about what they're going to do, and they literally mean none of it. They never have, they never will. So if today's environment, when it comes to the Iranian war with the United States and the shutting down of the Straits of Hormuz, if it's really based upon fundamental agreements, I don't think it's worth the paper it's written on. If it has to do with a reset and a recoil, well, what would I want if I were in Iran? I'd want you to leave me alone for 60 days while I move military assets around. I get more supplies coming in from Russia and China and from other aligned supporters of the Iranian regime. I'm going to try to reset the economy. I'm going to try to squash a retaliation amongst the citizens in Iran. I'm going to reestablish my Republican Guard and my leadership. I'll spend 60 days preparing for the next round, which may come as early as December, after the president may or may not lose the control of the House and Senate. It may be in 30 months when there's a new president in the White House. The one thing I've seen in my lifetime, I'm 62 years old, they haven't changed as long as I've been an adult. They never have, they never will. So this is not about a ceasefire relative to the supply. The traders think it's over. And it could be. Maybe there's a settlement in terms of commodity prices going up. Maybe there's some kind of a recoil and supply can catch up in the next 6 to 12 months. I don't think so. What really bothers me the most, all it takes is a couple of missiles, takes a couple of torpedoes, takes a couple of landmines to completely disrupt the Strait of Hormuz, and we're right back to square one, except for one critical element. The secret sauce of the supply around the globe, and that's called soft barrels. If we cannot replace the soft barrels that came out of strategic reserves, that came out of tanks, that filled up our pipelines, all the storage we had that gave us 60 days of additional supply, if that secret sauce is not replenished in a very rapid pace, we are twice as vulnerable the next time there's a disruption in the Strait of Hormuz than we ever have been. We do not have a safety net the next time the Strait of Hormuz is shut down. I believe the Iranians know that. I believe that our bad actor enemies, who are always antagonists to our effort to have global democracy and peace, like China and Russia, they've seen it, they know it, they've witnessed it, they know exactly where the weak spot is for modern domestic and, of course, democratic societies. They know it's energy. And lack of energy means chaos, financial destruction, and it happens very, very quickly.